All right, so we are back with another book review, and this month our book was The One Thing. Now, this is a awesome book, I think, for so many different reasons, and I'm not going to recap the entire book, but what I will do is I will point out a few of the key things that stood out to me and things that we are talking about amongst our team. So, the biggest theme about this book is that we're probably focused on way too many things and we need to narrow it down. Because when you really think about it, the thing that really drives the results that we are trying to achieve, it's usually not all these small things that we're chasing. It usually comes down to a very few list of things. And if we really want to be honest, there's usually one thing that kind of tips it over the edge. And that is one of the big concepts in the book because I think far too many of us, myself included, tend to buy into this lie that we can multitask because the book also talks about like the idea of multitasking. It's a myth. It doesn't really exist. And this wasn't the first time that I heard that because I remember being in Aspen and I remember talking to some of the guys who take you through some of the trails, and they were telling me about, a lot of people, I guess former, Navy SEALs or tier 1 operators in the military would come out there and train. And one of the things that they learned in those trainings is that, there's really no such thing as multitasking. What we tend to call as multitasking is really just our brain bouncing back and forth between ideas. And the reality is, we're probably making ourselves more tired than we realize. And that is something that was happening to me a lot. I would say probably over the last 2 months, because like I'd come in, I got to get some stuff done. And then I'm looking at emails or I'm checking Slack messages or jumping over here, like, let me do this while that file is loading. And I'm bouncing between all of these ideas. And what I was noticing is probably around 4 p.m., I was just like, man, I am mentally exhausted. I'm mentally done. And what I also noticed is I wasn't really getting as much accomplished, but I made a slight, shift and said, hey, what if I just focus on the thing that I'm doing? Like, hey, turn my phone upside down or turn it over so the notifications aren't popping up, pulling my attention. What if I just focused on the thing that I was doing? What would happen? And what I noticed is my productivity definitely started to go up. Now, another concept in the book is really to think about what is that one thing that you can do that will really move the ball and drive results forward. Because often what you might not realize, but eventually, hopefully, you do, is that there's usually one thing that if you focused on one thing that was so important that a lot of times it could solve the small things that you were trying to resolve. Because I think about this when it came down to our sales. So when it came down to us getting more clients, more sales in our business, it comes down to a couple of things that we were doing. I mean, you got marketing strategies, we were doing email marketing and all of these different things. And it's not to say that those things are bad. Those things are good. But when we started to apply this one thing concept, we said, okay, all right, out of all this stuff that we're doing, it's not that it's bad, but if we had to boil it down and say, okay, what is the one thing that we need to do to actually generate more sales and revenue in our business? And when we took a step back, we said, it wasn't the marketing plan, it wasn't the speaking engagements, it wasn't all these webinars. The one thing that we needed to make sure we do is just ask people to do business with us. And when we sat back and we thought about it, we was like, you know what? That seems so obvious. But when we looked at our activity, what we were doing, what we realized is we were putting out a ton of marketing content, doing a ton of advertising, showing up at conferences, webinars, and doing all this stuff. But we weren't actually asking people to do business with us. We weren't making that call to action very clear. But when we started to make that clear, what we noticed is people actually started reaching out more to do business with us because we got very clear on what's the one thing that we needed to do. Now, since we are focused on that one thing, all of the other activities that we're doing, all the marketing we're doing, the speaking at conferences, webinars, all that other stuff is now becoming more productive because we made it very clear on the one thing that we need to get done. And so, one of the things that I encourage you to do is to take a look at your calendar. And I want you to ask yourself how much of the time you spent doing different things on your calendar, how much does that support the one most important thing that you need to be doing with your time? So, if you think about it, is hey, what is your goal? What's the one thing that you could be doing that will help move you closer to that goal more than anything else? And then look at your calendar and ask, how much of my time is spent doing the one thing that is going to make a difference? Because if you aren't spending enough time on the one thing, you're probably going to be burning a lot of energy doing things that might be good or things that might be okay, but they aren't the one thing that is really going to make a difference. So I encourage everyone, check out the book, The One Thing, and make sure you are thinking about it in your own day, in your own week, your own month, is you really need to ask yourself every day, what is the one thing that if I did that, it will move me closer to my goal than anything else? Because when you focus on that one thing, you will see much more progress and a whole lot less stress with whatever you are working towards. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Law Firm and Finance Show, where we give you great content that helps you build a more successful law firm. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on all platforms and follow us for more content.